Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm Dr. David Moffet, and today my guest is Jayne Bandy. Jayne is a fellow Australian, just like myself. And Jayne, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Now, thank you, Jayne. Now, Jayne, you're the owner and founder of Dental Phone Excellence and Call Tracking Excellence, which are two companies that strive to help dental practices, convert more calls into appointments, to help them reduce cancelled appointments and help them nurture effective patient communication that will result in increased profitability for the dental practice. Now, I understand from your website that your past experience as an educator combined with your passion for practice management gives you a unique set of skills that allows your team to fully understand and take advantage of the tools that you present. Jayne, tell me, how do you help dentists?
Wow, that's a great question. I feel like I'm in an elevator. That's my pitch. How do I help dentists? I suppose, I help dentists by helping their teams. The team is the dentist's biggest investment in their practice. And sadly enough, the most overlooked or misunderstood as being the driving force of their business. So I work with teams, and basically we're working with three specific areas. The first one is that we're working on their phone skills. So all of this is related to phone skills. But the first one is that we're really working hard at getting the new patients to convert to appointments. So whenever a person rings your dental office, that's what the result should be most of the time, okay, that we make them an appointment because that's how we're truly going to help them. I have this little saying that people don't call a dental office to order a pizza. And sometimes it sounds really extreme to think of it like that, but we lose sight very easily about what we're actually there to do when we're answering phones in a dental practice or any business. And that is we want to convert those callers to appointments. The second one is that we're preventing and working on how we handle that cancellation call. Movements in the appointment book is one of the biggest disruptions to a dental practice. It has so much trickle-on effect for the dental practice for the day and for the week. So we're trying to eliminate it in the first place. We stop it from happening, but we also do need to know what can we do when we get those reasons for cancellations that really aren't valid. Our patients then get in this behaviour where they're just so used to moving their appointments that that's what they do all the time. And we've actually helped create that. The third one that I work on with dental teams is that idea of retention in the practice. Because, once you've got those patients in the practice, we should be nurturing them and keeping them there, giving them that ultimate patient experience and making sure that, they want to keep coming back and they're not going to go somewhere else. So really, in a nutshell, they're the three things that I work on with teams to help dentists.
It's an interesting thing. Why would people need to hire you? Why can't dentists or dental offices just do this themselves?
Well, they can do that, but they're not going to do it very well. Or what I've seen in the past where they're not willing to make that shift and have someone like me come into the practice and work with their team, it only lasts for a while. They get caught up in what's happening in the day. So having someone external coming in really creates that accountability. And that's what makes everything work so well, is to have a level of accountability for your team.
How do you create that accountability? What do you do?
You're asking me very good questions today. I'm loving these. The accountability for team members who are answering phones in the practice is that obviously we want to be tracking and measuring and making sure that they're getting the results that they need to get to make the practice run smoothly. So what I discovered, not that long ago, well, I didn't discover it, but I realised that I really needed to know what they were saying on the phones. And so what we started doing was we started recording the calls coming into practices. And that straight away spiked the accountability of the team. Just the fact that they knew that someone was actually listening to the calls actually made them do better. Obviously, there was a long way to go because we needed to really create good systems of how we talk to our patients. But just that one little thing just spiked it straight away. So when we then looked at what was actually happening on the phones, and what I was finding was I could actually listen to, 5 or 6 phone calls, and all of a sudden I could hear straight away where the issues were and what we needed to do to fix them and to get those results. But prior to that, we would never have known that. It would have just been a bit of guesswork, asking teams, where do you think you're having issues with, the way that you're communicating with patients and those phone calls. And they would sort of feed stuff back to me that maybe wasn't quite how it was. And this is the truth when you're listening to those phone calls. And, and the teams I work with where we're doing this already have really responded well to it. They really started getting it and having this awareness that they never had before we were recording the calls.
It's an interesting concept because a lot of dentists and practice owners will tell you, my phones are going okay.
Yeah.
And often they're judging this by feel as opposed to measurement. Mm-hmm. And the issue that they feel is that they walk past occasionally they walk past the front office when a phone call is coming in, but they're only hearing what's being said by the receptionist. They're not hearing what's being asked by the caller. And so when you're listening to the calls, I imagine it's kind of like if you took your child for piano lessons and the piano teacher just said, this is what you need to play, but never listened to your child actually play. How would your child improve if the piano teacher didn't know where your child was at when you started the lesson? And so over time, I can imagine that as you listen to phone calls and you work with teams, they get better at their weaknesses and they get better at the things that they do well. And so that's a win for everybody. It's a win for the employee. It's because they're doing their job better. It's a win for the people calling the practice because they get their appointments made and they get their problems solved. And it's also a win for the dental practice because more appointments are being made. And so the appointment book fills out. And when the appointment book fills out, less cancellations happen because people can't get in as readily as well. So I imagine it's a win-win situation. Why is nobody else doing what you're doing? Why is nobody else listening to phone calls on a regular basis and feeding this back on a regular basis?
Well, they are, but not in dental. And this is the crazy part is that, this is not like, this is not avant-garde. This is not like groundbreaking new technology. We've had the ability to be able to set up call recording and tracking in businesses for a long time. And yet what was happening out there is the big corporates, the big companies have been doing it for ages. Big car companies, they really want to track. They know how important that front office first line of contact is in their business. They know that that's where the real conversion is starting to happen. Whereas with dentistry, we're really, steps ahead with a lot of things. But for some reason, I think we've been a bit backwards with this. And it is 2024. And I just think that if this technology is available, everyone's screaming out about AI, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I'm thinking, well, this technology has been here and has a significant, makes a significant difference in businesses. Otherwise, the big businesses wouldn't have bothered doing this. They're teaching us, they're telling us something. Just because we're small businesses, this is something that's quite doable. That's, it can fit into the economy of our business and make such a big difference. Because as you said before, David, you said that on those calls, not only are we listening to the team, we're also listening to the patients. So we're getting, more information and more idea about the types of patients that are ringing the practice and what they're asking, what they're wanting, as well as how the team are performing with the results that they're getting on those calls. But basically, I tell teams this all the time. You have such an important job. Your role is so crucial to the business, because without the phones, and I know there's online appointments which end up turning into phone calls so we can find out a bit more. But without those phone calls, there's no patient sitting in your chair, unless you're going to sit there and wait for people to walk past your window and go, oh, there's a dental practice there. Let's see if I can book an appointment. This is the phone, as old-fashioned as it seems still. Well, it's not, because we pay so much for, that mobile phone that we walk around with all the time. But the phones are the lifeline still to the dental practice. If your phones went out tomorrow, I've seen Facebook posts where the phones go down and there's panic. So, oh my God, are my patients ringing me? What's happening? You've lost that line of communication that your patients need and require. So why are we not investing time, energy and money into the people answering your phones? It just, this is why I chose to actually go down this road, because I knew that this was so crucial and important. And the practices that I work with, the penny dropped for them and they got it. And that's when they reached out to me.
You mention online bookings, and I'll come back to that, but you raise a really good point. And a lot of dental practice owners think that the answer to their problems of not having enough patients is to just invest more in marketing to make the phone ring more. Yeah. But if the people answering the phone aren't skilled at solving the problem of the caller, then that caller won't make an appointment, or they'll make an appointment begrudgingly and then either cancel it or not show up because the experience on the phone hasn't been what they've been looking for. And that's a really, really important thing that dental practice owners need to recognise. I tell dentists who are cricket fans, it's kind of like you own a cricket team and you buy a new fast bowler, but your wicketkeeper can't catch the ball. Well, guess what? 4 buys, 4 runs, dropped, and nothing changes. You don't dismiss the team. They score lots of runs and everything still stays the same. Yeah. Whereas if you've got great catches, then those are the people who are getting the calls and they're putting the people into the appointments that they're meant to. And so back to online, because online is a medium that younger adults are now using for booking appointments at booking restaurants, booking shows, things like that. But there is still some communication, and online is good in dental because it gets us a contact point, and the real winning practices are the ones who are then phoning those online bookings just to ask if they need directions, if there's anything specific. So the online booking isn't a substitute what I'm finding, but it's actually an adjunct into creating a 2-person conversation about the upcoming appointment. And that's really, really important. And I see that that's what you're doing in listening to two-way conversations, because you're able to see what the callers are asking, but you're also able to see which team members are skilled at answering and which team members need help with conversation.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up about online. The one thing I have noticed that's definitely a trend and a pattern, one of the biggest cancelled appointments is the online appointment booking. It's a new patient, doesn't have anything vested with you, doesn't know you, hasn't had any rapport with you. This is only if you haven't contacted them after they've done the online booking. So we see it's a little old-fashioned, but the whole point of what we're trying to do, especially in small businesses, to keep our patients, to personalise everything and to keep our patients coming back, is to have that connection and that relationship with them. And that's been proven. If you have a relationship with your customers, your clients, your patients, you're very much more likely, significantly more likely to keep those patients coming back. And you only have to look at your own personal behaviour there. You can prove it with what you do out there in the world of business. So, the online booking is interesting. It is. I remember once I made that shift and I'm going, online bookings, how do you build a rapport with an online booking? And then I found a way that did involve making contact on the phone prior to the appointment. And those patients that we made that point of contact with by calling them after they made the online booking, actually more of them kept their appointment than didn't. So we proved we worked it. But going back to what you said, David, about the practices with high volume and doing more marketing, so you're getting the phone to ring more, absolutely, that's fine if you've got the volume of team to take the calls as well and who are highly skilled at being able to convert. But I've actually seen clients that I've had who, at first I was a bit concerned, oh my gosh, they don't seem to have a high volume of calls compared to other practices. But when we looked and compared the different conversions that they had, the team that had the low volume of calls were actually performing better than the ones with the high calls because they were able to manage it better and they were more highly skilled at converting. So even though they didn't have the high volume of calls, they still were achieving great results for the practice. So, and it's getting, you've got to really get that balance right too, because there's nothing worse. And I hear this sometimes. I can hear the calls coming in and straight away I know they're understaffed, that they need, if you've got that volume of calls coming in, we've got this skill that we're developing in the team, this is where we need to make this shift if you want to make this work. Otherwise, reduce the volume of calls.
It's crazy, Jayne, because I see it in my side of practice management in that, it costs $300 a day to have an extra staff member there to answer the phones. And that's one extra dental appointment made for a checkup and clean.
Yeah.
Really, that's all, or one medium-sized filling. So it's not that big an investment to have somebody extra answering the phone so that calls don't get missed, because I know that when I ring dental practices, if the call goes through to a message service, I don't leave a message. Yeah. And rarely do I ever get called back by the dental practice as well. A missed call, they just put it down as a missed call. But Jayne, when I started coaching, I think it was my first client, her dental receptionist, when we ran the numbers on cancellations, her dental receptionist was allowing 8 times more cancellations than the practice manager on the day that the practice manager was answering the phones, and proportionately. And this was because that dental receptionist believed that if somebody wanted to cancel their appointment, they would say, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, rather than trying to avoid or reduce the number of cancellations. So it's interesting when you mention about just having accountability and measuring, and the fact that we start to listen, we start to get an improvement straight away. I guess it's like people who want to lose a few kilos or pounds. As soon as they decide they're going to go on a diet and they start weighing themselves every day, their behaviours change so that their weight goes down. If they weigh themselves once a month, they're not as invested in losing those few kilos or pounds. And it's the same at the dental practice. If they're not measuring these things, then it's all just guesswork. And I guess that's where you come in, because you talk, how often do you listen to calls at each of your practices multiple times a week, and then you talk to them a couple of times a month on a Zoom call as well. So it's not just fly in, fly out sort of situation. You're there with them as they grow and improve. How does that work for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Anna, and it's such a great conversation when I first worked with teams, we talk about phone calls, and sometimes they're trying to recall these phone calls, and I will send call recordings to them. They have the ability to be able to log into the portal, to be able to look at their calls on the portal where I can tag them, and they can actually really learn, because that's a real learning curve, is to actually listen to yourself, which at first is a bit difficult, but once you get past this out of your voice, you're okay. And then you team members would say to me, probably what I say when I listen back to some of my calls even, oh my gosh, did I really say that? I could have said that. Oh, I didn't even know I kept saying that, and little things that they can then perfect. and they want to start getting better at the calls as well. And they start to get what a difference it makes. And I've often had team members say to me, I didn't even think of it like that. You're right. That making that shift and those changes, I try and come in where, a lot of team members have got a lot of experience. So there's no point coming in and feeling like you're pushing everyone off their perch and we're not doing that. This is how we're doing it. They've been doing some great things already, but it's not quite enough. So we're working on getting them so that they can perform even better. And one thing I do love to see with the right team members as well is that the teams start to really feel good about their achievements. They really, and this is part of, I suppose, what I do with the teams is I'm really trying to make them feel good about what they're doing as well, to see that they're making a difference. And by helping them feel good about what they do every day, they're more likely to stay in their job, because who wants team members coming and going all the time? We want them to have that satisfaction that they're making a difference and it's starting to be measured. So they're feeling good, as well as getting results. So
you make a very good point there, Jayne, because in the dental practice and in the dental profession, dentists, hygienists, oral health therapists, dental employees sometimes get a little bit blasé about what they do because they do it all day long. But for the patient, no matter how seasoned a patient they are, some patients get very nervous about attending a dental practice, about phoning a dental practice, and about talking to a dental practice. And so turning it into an experience for the caller and the patient, as opposed to making it transactional, makes it really, really important in terms of making a difference for those patients. And as you said, when we listen to phone calls, what we're not doing is throw this out, got to do this. What we're doing is, I guess, helping them to tweak what they're doing, because you know what works, and it's not the gospel according to Jayne, it's the gospel according to Jayne's clients, because you've got a vast history of working with a number of practices. So you know across the industry what works and what gets said that works, as opposed to somebody who's just in a silo in a dental practice saying, let's try this and see if this gets us an improvement. But they don't listen, so they don't measure, so they don't really know. Yeah. And so you actually, I think, hear changes where they change the greeting because they hear other people changing and they say, oh, that must be working. But it actually, what they're saying on the phone is actually detracting from what they're trying to do, and that is to get the caller to relax and open up and trust the person who's there to solve their problem, and to make that phone call not a transaction but an experience, so that they get off the phone and the caller gets off the phone and says, I'm so glad I called that practice. That lady sounded so nice. I can't wait to meet her. And that's I guess that's what you're trying to do with your team, to get them to give that feeling to the caller.
Yeah, and I think what I've found over the years doing this as well is it's giving me the insight into how we're actually training our patients by the language that we actually use on the phone calls, unknowingly training them to do the things that we hate the most. So, when I work with teams, we really, work on things like cancellations and what are those hidden messages that we're actually sending to our patients that are actually telling them it's okay to do this. So it's making those shifts. And this has been a real awareness for a lot of new practices I'm working with. Again, it's that conversation. I never really thought of it like that. You're absolutely right. I am telling them it's okay to cancel. Like a good example is, I'll put you on a cancellation list. And really what you've said to them is, we have a list of patients who have cancelled. So what I'm saying to you is it's okay to cancel. and it's we're suggesting to them what we want them to do. So we make those shifts. The other one that I see a lot with teams is that they really often are not in control of the conversation with their patient. We want our patients to feel like they have a level of choice, but when it comes to the appointment schedule, you need to stay in control and your patients go into the appointment schedule where you need them to go. But of course, we're not going to say that to our patients. We're going to make them feel like they've got a level of choice. And we give them those small choices to take them to the place that we want them to be in the appointment book. And this is that art of suggestion, of being able to direct our patients in the right direction. And that goes for dentists as well when they're treatment planning. We're taking them to a place we want them to be to get the best care that we can give them. And that's what we need to be doing when it comes to phone calls, when we're initially talking to our patients. Of course, we're not at that stage of diagnosing the patient, but we're starting that level of care straight away, just scheduling, asking the questions, triaging correctly. Is it really emergency, or can that patient wait a few days so that I can still put an emergency in the emergency appointment time that's available? So there's so much involved in it. But again, what I do with teams is I have to simplify it. I have to bring it down to, I can't overwhelm them. And I have to make them feel like they can do this, they can achieve this. I had one young girl say to me, "Oh, it's okay for you. You've been doing this for years." And I said, "Well, now I have, but I didn't before." And they would say to me, "But I'm really bad at this." I go, "No, I was really bad at this." So, if I can do this, I always say to them, imagine what you can do. You can do so much, even if you're at the stage where you feel like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get to that level? And I've seen team members that have made that transition. They've made that switch, and now it's like, they're just getting amazing results. And sometimes they're team members that maybe I even had second doubts whether they would actually be able to do what we needed to do, and they did. And that's great, when you see that happen, that transformation. And that's great for them too, because that's what achieving is all about, rather than being just stuck in a rut, answering phones every day, doing the same thing. This mixes it up a bit for them, makes life interesting, gives them little challenges, gives them a sense of achievement and the acknowledgement of the achievement, which is really important in a dental practice and so often overlooked. We need to create that acknowledgement. And I try and weave that in a little bit with what I do with my coaching as well, because coming to work, feeling good about what you do, getting great results, and coming back and doing it again the next day is so important.
Jayne, you raise a good point there, because as far as I understand in the history of the world, no baby was ever born speaking. So speaking is actually a learned behaviour. And so people can learn what to say and how to respond in certain situations. And the dental practice is not really that difficult in terms of listening and then helping the patient to make the appointment. The trouble with dentistry as a product that people are buying is that it's a grudge buy. Nobody wakes up on a Monday morning and says, "Oh, I've still got $500 in my wallet. I think I'll go down to the dentist and see what I can buy." It's the last thing they ever want to do. They'd rather buy tyres than, even if they get told they need new tyres, they say, "Oh, can't I go another 1,000 kilometres? I might kill my family." But, they're more willing to run their tyres down than actually go to the dentist. It's the ultimate grudge buy. Nobody wants to go. So when you work in a dental practice, sometimes it's easier to let the patient cancel to reduce the pain of trying to convince them that they need to be coming to the dentist. So the role of the cancellation is often, as I've found, is actually caused by the dentist or the hygienist, the practitioner, not creating an urgency for the departing patient to make them keep the appointment that they're going to make. And so that's very difficult for a dental receptionist to reverse that sort of cancellation. But by the same token, as we were talking about before, a new patient calling a dental practice, it's the opportunity for that dental receptionist to wow that caller so that they go, "I'm so glad I called this practice because this lady was different. She helped me and she gave me hope and she listened to me as well." And so in that sort of situation, it's, as you said, it's about seeing whether the employees have the ability to grow as My Fair Lady did. And even in The Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort trained garbage men how to sell millionaires into investments by just training them on what to say here and what to say there in that process. And those were things that people wanted. So I see where you're coming from. I still can't understand why dentists ignore that, because
I think they're just overwhelmed by everything else. there's a lot of bells and whistles and stuff out there, and it can become overwhelming. Oh gosh, what's going to be the most important thing that's going to make the biggest difference in my practice? And again, the one thing that we invest the most money in, the most time, energy, and money, well, the most money, let's start with that first, is employing people. That's the biggest investment. Some dentists call the biggest overhead, biggest cost. And the ones that really get their team would never call them that, an overhead or a cost. They call them their investment. So when you've made such a big investment, you now need to invest in those people and what they're able to do for you in your business. Because really, when you hire people saying, oh, yeah, they've got all that experience, they bring them in. That doesn't always work out because they're having to make shifts and changes. But sometimes then what happens is the biggest investment you make comes into your practice and flounders. So it has to be nurtured. It's like a lot of, women invest in like expensive handbags and diamond rings and men have different things that they love as well, or brand new cars. You're not going to not wash it. You're not going to not have it maintained. You're not going to, because you spent lots of money on it. Yet I don't see that sometimes happening with dental teams. We've hired a really great person. We sometimes think that they've just arrived on the doorstep and everything is perfect. And I've seen people hire the most amazing people. They've got great experience, but we still have to do work with them. We still have to nurture them. We still have to make them feel like what they're doing is making a difference. So that journey that you're on when it comes to internal training, education, coaching, it's like your patients, isn't it? Continuity of care. You need to have that with your team as well. If you want them to stay, if you want them to come and go, switch and change, they get fed up. Sometimes they're hungry to learn and we don't give them anything. We're not watering them. They just come in and then they leave straight away. And then they end up working for someone else who hits all those marks. So they become this superstar somewhere else and you miss the mark. So you never want to do that. And it's never a waste of time, money and energy investing in your team, even if something happens and they do leave. Because if you do it right, you've got amazing systems set up in your practice that are part of the walls. They're part of the furniture in your practice. They're staying. They don't disappear. Just because the people disappear, people think that, they're taking everything with them. No, they're not. If you set this up properly, you've set it up in the practice as a system that then helps with onboarding. And that's obviously where, I come in and I work with onboarding all the time because that can happen. People leave for legitimate reasons as well. So,
well, it's a very interesting point that you say that. Yeah, and dentistry seems to be one of those professions where we tolerate people to come and work in our practice, but bring their own style. Yet that would never happen at the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton. You just because you worked at the Marriott doesn't mean that you can use your Marriott script at those hotels. If you worked at KFC, you can't use your KFC script if you go to McDonald's. It's the processes in that dental practice which the patients come for, and if somebody can appreciate that, what we're going to do is help them to improve on what they've done at a previous practice. That's really great. But again, you raise a really good point, because I talk to dentists and they say, look, well, I'll call you for coaching when I get the right team. And guess what happens? Years go down the track and they never get the right team.
Well, they
and
may have had the right team.
That's true. That's true. Others may have not had the right team, or the team needed to learn. And in so teaching them, as you've found, those people improve and the practice improves while they're learning. And so the practice never goes, the only way the practice goes backwards is if they actually stop your coaching. In fact, I was talking to a dentist today who said, working with his wife, he says, sometimes I have trouble communicating with my wife about what's needed to be said on the phones. He said, but I can see that having a third party person in there teaching her can take the pressure off me. And I think that, I know that worked in my practice. I used to tell my staff, if you don't get this done, Carol's going to kill you. And of course, it wasn't Carol that was going to be upset. It was always going to be me.
But we always, I think with the coaching as well, one of the most crucial ingredients is that we've got to enjoy it and we've got to have some fun while we're learning. And so this is part of what we do as a team. It's systematic in the sense that, yes, the teams are learning. I'm learning all the time from them as well, because I'm learning about, how I can do this and what I need to do to help develop them. Each of them are very different, even though we come together as teams. So sometimes there's opportunities to have one-on-one sessions as well, where we can have a little bit more of a candid conversation about how they're going. The one thing that I've discovered that I suppose is something that I've always found easy, people open up to me. And that's when sometimes we can now work out why certain behaviours might be happening at the practice with the teams when it comes to communicating with patients and what their hurdles are. So they're very open with me, and that really helps. And I find that's something that is a real benefit to the team, is to have, as you said, someone external that they can come in. And it's not that we're talking about in a negative way things that are happening at the practice, but it could be things that are concerning them that they're too afraid to talk to the boss about. So they want to have an open discussion. And I always say to the team, whenever we have those discussions and there might be an issue, always come with solutions. Even if it's not the right solution, it's a solution we can work with. And that's the same as when they're talking to the bosses, I suppose, and having those conversations. So it's quite personalised, I think, what I do. It's very, I had a team member today. I've been working with a practice for 5 years, and they've had the same team. They had one team member that actually joined their team after 4 years of me working with them. So it would have been about 5 years since there was any changes. And then one team member has decided that they're moving on because they're looking at maybe growing in a different direction. But there's been such continuity with this team because it's been the same team working together. And it's a real culture. I can see that beautiful culture that happens in that practice. And I come in and I have to fit in with that culture. I have to be part of the team. They see me as someone external because I'm not there every day with them, but I'm part of their team. And that's something that's been really important to me to make that happen.
How did you fall into this role, Jayne? How did you become an educator in the dental field?
Well, I was always an educator. Well, not always. I was actually a primary school teacher, and a lot of people may already know that about me. And then, of course, I married a dentist, and it was like, how am I going to put these two things together? And I was sort of coaxed. I didn't say coerced. I said coaxed into coming into work in your dental practice. And the gig was supposed to be to come in to talk to patients. And I thought, I don't know whether I like talking to people. So that was, right up my alley. I loved it. And that was when we were really making those switches and changes at the practice to make sure that our patient, we personalised everything and we really got to know our patients. And gosh, that shift made a big difference. Sorry. Not swearing here on your podcast. And so then one thing led to another, and there was that ghastly day, which can happen in any practice, where two team members who are answering phones are off on the same day. Sick, this stuff like this just happens, and we have to shift and adapt. So it was my turn to be the person answering phones. I had my script next to me, so I knew the greeting, had a few other things. And then I used to say at the end of the day, I was highly skilled at making sure no new patients booked appointments, everyone cancelled, and patients didn't make their next appointment. So, of course, I then realised that I wasn't getting good results. So there was a risk that I might lose my job or get divorced. So I decided that I needed to start learning and start developing, which is what really happened. It was like I realised that this is the result I wanted to get. So I was really focused on the end result. And then I knew what I wanted to do, but it was the whole process. What did I need to follow? And then I started seeing little changes. I used to ask patients, when would you like to come in for your appointment? And I thought, some were saying, I don't want to make any more appointments now. But I wanted them to make appointments. I knew that was the best thing for them. So it was just that little shift about let's make that appointment for you, then create the urgency by actually talking about what the appointment's for, and then make that shift as well that I was suggesting and directing the patient to what they needed to do next. And most of the time the patients would actually say to me, yeah, let's do that. They wanted that. It's like we forget that our patients come to us for advice. And I always say to team members, you're not like working in a medical practice where you ring up and schedule an appointment. You would never ask someone in a medical practice any medical questions. But I don't know what it is. When you ring a dental practice, the team member on the phone now becomes a mini dentist just for that 4 minutes that they're on the phone. And so the patients are asking team members questions. We need to know what to ask. We need to create that level of triage so we're scheduling properly. So it's quite an involved role at the practice answering those phones. It's like nowhere else really. It's really, they really need to have the skill. It's a highly skilled position. And I think more and more dentists are starting to work that out with the types of people they're hiring. They're not just reaching out for anyone that can pick a telephone up. They're realizing now that they need the right people. They reward these people by paying them the right amount of money and train them. And so it's starting to, I can see it's a new age. Is that the right word? A new age of the types of people that are now working in the front line of a dental practice. And I think there's going to be would you call it like a revolution?
A customer service revolution, maybe, Jayne.
Like a revolution. It's like, we want more highly skilled people. We're going to attract those people and when we have those sorts of people, we need to feed them. We need to nurture them. They're not going to be content with just signing up and then that's the end of that. Off I go. They want to learn. They're hungry for it.
I think what you bring up there is a really good point, that scheduling an appointment for somebody at a dental practice should be an experience for them and not just a transaction, which is, as you say, putting a name in a slot, my job is done. And often I see that in practices that I coach, that the receptionist has what I call white space disease. They don't like to see a white space in their appointment book. And as soon as a name's in there, they go, that's my job done. But there's so much more than just putting a name in a slot.
But that's all they know. I always give them the benefit of the doubt. You only know what you know, as cliche as it sounds. It's true. We've all been there. We only knew what we knew. We only know what we know. And we need to know more to do better. And this is where I find it quite sad for a lot of team members, is that they keep going on doing only what they know, thinking that what they know is the best. No one ever saying to them that they're not getting great results and we need to help you be better. They think they are already better. And sometimes I meet these team members and I'm working with them for the first time and they think they're amazing. And I'm not saying they haven't got the potential, but there's so much more they could be doing. We're continually learning. There's no end point. There's no, I've reached the best I could be. There is no end point to that. There's always room for more. And so, once these team members get this, they understand that, oh my gosh, I thought I was doing everything right. And now I realize I could have been doing so much more, and with the right people, with the right attitude as well. So that goes back to recruiting, isn't it? Recruit people that are obviously always well presented, people that like coming into work and are friendly, people that have a love of people. You're going to employ someone who doesn't love people. I don't know whether we can change that mindset, but hungry to learn and make improvements and get results. Like they're out there. There's so many people like that fit that bill, that they're the people we should be hiring, and we shouldn't be in a situation where we're desperately hiring the wrong people.
Now, Jayne, you mentioned that you have a superpower, and that is that when you listen to the first 5 phone calls of a new client, you can diagnose exactly what's going on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I put everyone to the challenge. Give me 5 phone calls to listen to, and I'll tell you exactly what's not happening at your front desk. I'll also tell you what is happening. I can really determine that. I'm hearing the patient, that interaction. Sometimes I have to be really mindful with what I do because I'm critiquing. And it's easy to get into the habit of critiquing everything that needs improvement. So all that negative stuff that we know we can change. I also critique and look at the really fabulous things that are happening on the calls. But really the dentists that I talk to, they want to know what's not happening. That's where the change is going to be significant in my practice. But sometimes they don't know what good stuff is happening too. So there needs to be that awareness as well. But yeah, it's amazing. You could say, and it's not like I need to listen to 1,000 phone calls to determine it. It's like, sometimes I had one team where I listened to 4 phone calls. I listened to lots of phone calls, by the way, but I listened to the first 4 phone calls and it was like, I've been doing this for long enough now that it doesn't take long for me to get it. And then it's looking at each of these people and trying to work out how am I going to best approach this to get the best results from these people. So the learning process has to be adapted slightly to each of these people that I work with. They're not all this, it's not a cookie cutter. It's not like, here's what you need to learn, off you go. These are people. They're intricate. They have different ways they learn, just like they did at school. It doesn't change because they're not at school and they're adults. So they learn differently, sometimes at different rates, and we have to sometimes be patient. Other people are quicker, and they bring a lot to the plate too. There's a lot of stuff happening in people's lives that can affect how they learn. So, and I think dentists out there know when they're employing people in their practice, they are intricate. They come with a lot of stuff that we have to work our way around, and that's just life. Unless, we're planning on going down the road of robots. Let's hope not. Not yet, anyway. I'm sure they.
Well, every conversation is different, Jayne, and it's really important that ultimately, as you said, what you're trying to do is help dental practices to schedule more appointments, reduce cancellations, and thus build out the book. Because when that happens, what that means is that the dental receptionist's biggest fear never eventuates. And that fear is that when the book is empty, the dentist comes out and says, time to do some reactivation. If you want to see a dental reception scatter, I've got to go to the post office. I've got to go and clean out the back.
Tidy.
They don't even want to do that. And so this actually prevents their biggest fear. And a happy appointment book is a happy dentist and therefore a happy team. Jayne, how do dentists and dental practice owners get in touch with you to find out more about how you can help their practice? What's the best way for them to find you? I know you work in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and North America. How can they find you?
Okay, good question. Well, I do have obviously a telephone number. They can ring me on the telephone. But I have lots of different avenues, obviously on my social media, but also on I do have a website. And a lot of people do find me through there.
What's your website address, Jayne?
Sorry?
What's your website address?
So it's dentalphoneexcellence.com. And yeah, that's the best one to get me on.
All right. And do you have an email address?
Yes, it's Jayne at the DPE. So it's thedpe.com. Have you got the ability to put this in?
Yeah, I'll put these up. So Jayne at the DPE.com, and they can see from the screen that Jayne is spelt with a Y.
Yeah, Jayne with a Y.
And it's dentalphoneexcellence.com is your website as well.
Yeah. And I think contact points. See, a lot of the people that contact me have come from reading my blogs, having a look at something else, because they're trying to get a flavour of me to see if this is a good match. And I understand that. So, and I've built up years, I suppose, of credibility that I am that go-to person in Australia and other countries when it comes to call tracking and phone skills. I really niched myself. I felt like that was something that was missing. And there weren't a lot of people doing it, just that. They were doing like a lot of practice management, which is really important. How to manage your practice, super important. But they weren't doing those specific, phone skills and setting up call tracking and having all those things that will make a big difference to your practice, huge difference. So I wanted to get involved with something like this that I was also really good at. And I walked the talk. I did this for many years, so I really know how to do it. And I really know.
So you're not teaching anybody things that you haven't already done as well.
That's exactly right. Like I find it, it's, and I know there's a lot of people that are out there and they're teaching things they haven't done themselves. And it's not to say that they're not doing a great job, but when you've done it, you really get it. And the team members, I've found that once they know that about me, they go, Jayne really gets me. She understands what it's like doing what I do, because that's what I did for so many years. And so I totally understand where they're coming from all the time and how difficult it can be, how they have to multitask, and so much is put on their shoulders and expected from them. So
because you've done their job.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah.
Jayne, thanks very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. And I'm sure that once dentists and dental practice owners watch this episode back, they're going to be in touch with you about improving their phone conversions, that's for sure. Jayne Bandy, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks very much, David.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.